Hey, Patrick.
Yes,
You're
Carl.
in Arizona, right?
I am.
You know what a greater feat from raising Arizona is? You know what there's an even greater feat? Wheeling, West Virginia.
I've actually been to Winslow, Arizona, of Eagles song fame.
Yeah, I know somebody who stood on the corner in Winslow, Arizona, and there's like a sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Eagles sang about this place.
Right, yeah. Is that good enough? Can we just go on with the music?
Let's do it.
No, but yes.
Hey, guys, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Carl?
Patrick, you're in the remote office.
Yeah, in an undisclosed location in Arizona.
Right. Well, not completely undisclosed.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Arizona's a big territory.
Yeah.
Big territory.
Yeah.
There's an army base there too, right?
Somewhere.
So there was quite a few stories this week. 6, I'm counting, that we are interested in. 6 plus we want a LastPass Bitwarden update.
The gift that keeps on giving. Let's start with that.
Let's start with that. I mean, a friend of mine installed Bitwarden, and he said it was a seamless experience coming from LastPass. They even have like a wizard that moves you from LastPass to Bitwarden, and everything just worked. But that's very convenient, isn't it?
So here's the thing. There's a lot of conjecture that, LastPass isn't taking the world seriously enough, and they're not fixing the problems. They've had breaches. Yeah. The breaches seem to escalate, and they don't seem to be doing all the things. They're not innovating anymore. And I think that's because they probably, from what I understand, they've been sold a number of times.
Yeah, they got bought out by a venture capital company or something, right?
And so,
private equity firm.
Yeah, you don't make a lot of money on private equity by pouring money into the product. Right. You just milk it. And so I think the milking is about over. And 1Password, I know that, Dwayne, you use 1Password and you like it. Bitwarden is the most likely one that I would go to because I have the control. Now that might turn off some entry-level users.
Yeah.
Is because they don't understand the things that are left to you. And your friend, who I also know, is quite technical.
Yeah, he is.
So we'll probably take a look at it before the summertime and maybe switch over if it's really that good. The more control I have, the more of a pain it is.
But it's less convenient.
Mm-hmm. And that's good for me.
More secure.
So, this is a never-ending thing. It's like your car insurance, your home insurance is never always going to be the best because it changes. Different companies degrade in their services and their offerings, and others emerge. And so, unfortunately, password management is one of those things where you're going to have to pay attention to it every few years.
Right. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move to Bitwarden just with their managed thing. And you guys are thinking about running a server? Is that what you're doing?
If we do it, we'll host our own server.
Yeah. We'll definitely, before I host any passwords on it, I'm absolutely going to review the code.
All right. Good. That's a really great idea, Dwayne, because then you can tell us what you found.
Yeah, and as the guy who knows how to tear apart software, it's interesting because it's hard. Even that subset, I'm not a great developer, but I know how to rip code apart. Great developers can write amazing code, but they don't know how to break code in a way that's beneficial to hackers. So sometimes, me looking at the code will be better than, say, a really great developer. Not because I'm not picking on the Bitwarden developers. I'm sure they're doing a fantastic job, but just different point of view.
Right.
So let me add something. When you can, like when you're not using the add-on to fill in the password for you, which is one of the big conveniences for the average person. So I understand it's going to have a password. But whenever you're not going to be using that functionality, it's always a good idea to put a hint in the password manager and not the actual password.
Absolutely.
Mm. And there's all sorts of ways to do that. You can use, references to childhood best friend or, childhood best friend's phone number, things that people would have to have a lot of data about you to get, or just, initials, something that will jog your memory that you'll be able to remember. I don't use the password automatic fill-in. I have basically a lookup, and it's all hints. Yeah. But hints that I know how to understand. So
you're hyper paranoid, though.
I am.
Like me, I do. For dear listener,
I hang out with you.
I know, but even I use the auto fill-in password I use 1Password, and I use the auto fill-in for it, and I let it generate a really complex password, and I just don't want to know what it is.
I got it. Dwayne is Jean-Luc Picard, and Pat is Captain Kirk. Enemy vessel approaching. Fire torpedoes.
100%. I think that's
wait a
accurate.
minute. Wait a minute. So mute Dwayne's microphone for a minute. When we first started working together, we were doing secure software, and I had Dwayne come to me once a week for a couple of weeks saying, your admin password shouldn't be this. And he told me what my password was. Because he knew what Loft Crack was before I did.
Loft Crack? What's that?
It's an old cracking software it was an old password cracker in the early days. And so I had to change my admin logon to 54 characters. And then he stopped doing that. So I've got a few, scars, let's just say.
Right.
Well, you're working with Dwayne. No wonder.
I'm happy to be Kirk.
Right.
I'm happy to be Kirk. Kirk fought a Gorn.
Whoa. Picard was the way better. Yeah, but he was a much better commander.
Yeah. I agree, but Gorn. I mean, I'd be happy to be the guy who fought the Gorn. I think that's our title for this episode.
Gorn?
Yeah. You might have to fight a Gorn.
All right.
I like it.
Oh.
Okay, where do we start? Norton?
Yeah. Well, while we're on password managers, let's talk about one.
I know, right?
So let me give everybody a little history of what Norton was. Norton was started by a guy named Peter Norton, who was a geek and a software guy and a really low-level software hardware guy.
A pundit.
And he always did these books, Norton, the Norton Guide to DOS or whatever. Yep. And he'd be standing there in a shirt with his sleeves rolled up and his arms crossed, looking all smug, like, I know what you don't know. And it's in this book. And then Norton Utilities came out for DOS and then Windows, and then it just kept going. Peter Norton's probably dead and gone by now. I don't know where he is.
That uniform was kind of like the hoodie version of the corporate days.
It was.
Yeah,
it was.
That's right.
Look at this upstart with his rolled up sleeves and
no tie on.
His arrogant posture.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's the history of Norton. So now it's a big company. I don't even know if Peter Norton's involved with it anymore, but that's where it came from. So anyway, everything has changed since, but that brand hasn't really.
Yep.
And so now they're into password management.
Well,
they've changed their name now.
Yeah, they're into a lot of things. And Norton always has been, right? They had some antivirus stuff. They have password managers. They're kind of hovering around a lot of that space.
What could go wrong?
Yeah. Right? It's awesome. So what's interesting here is, we got this from Bleeping Computer. So Norton LifeLock warns that hackers breach password manager accounts. So this is why we're bringing this up with password managers. One of the things I'd like to point out here is, this article is very interesting, but it starts off with, formerly Symantec Corporation, Norton LifeLock is sending data breach notifications to customers, informing them that hackers have successfully breached Norton password manager accounts in a credential stuffing attack. And then they just keep going.
Credential stuffing. We talked about that before, but I don't remind us what it is. Yeah, let's review.
So that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up, because we're seeing a lot of hype around password managers being breached. And here's another one, right? And I think it's easy for the viewer to just dismiss, oh my gosh, they're all probably terrible. I can't believe the Norton one was breached. I can't believe, LastPass was breached, etc. A credential stuffing attack is where you literally, as a hacker, you go out on the dark web, the interwebs where nobody else surfs,
also known as Dwayne's house.
Yeah,
no, Dwayne's neighbor's house.
Right? Oof. And you find usernames and passwords, legitimate usernames and passwords. So, let's say for some reason Patrick logged into some random, hardware website for tools, and he bought tools, and he's created his own account there, and he has a username and password there. And that password may be not tied to anything.
I always use Carl Franklin as my password.
Yeah, I know. I use Patrick Hines.
What could go wrong?
And I quit. No, so if you were, let's say you used the same password on that site that you would have used somewhere else, right?
Password reuse.
Then if I were a hacker, which I am, and I found that username and password on the internet, I would try and use that username or your persona, your email addresses or whatever, with that password on everything I possibly could think of.
Right.
your Bank of America account, your, password manager accounts, whatever it possibly could. And that's what's happening here. That's what a credential stuffing attack is.
It's a guess.
It's taking known passwords. It is guessing, but it's like educated guessing. It's like, I know these 10 passwords are Patrick's, so I'm going to use these 10 passwords on everything Patrick could potentially log into.
Say that 5 times fast.
Patrick
Hines,
Fluffy 123.
Right.
Exclamation point.
Yes.
So did you know?
So if you look at the headline, you would quickly dismiss the fact that, oh my gosh, another password manager got breached. But in this particular case, this is users have used the same password somewhere else on the internet that they use for their password manager.
Oh, that's terrible.
And when a hacker found that password on the internet, they then just tried it on the password manager site, and lo and behold, they got access to everybody's the passwords there.
So they got the password manager password.
Correct. Because
if they have the password manager password, can't they get all the other passwords? Can't you just copy them to the clipboard?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's not the fault of the vendor.
No.
It's the fault of the user.
No, and that's the point of this. Exactly.
Wait. Oh, okay. All right. So they found username and passwords on the dark web that had nothing to do with the password manager.
Correct.
They tried
but we're
them
associated
against
with the user.
Yeah. Then they tried them against Norton LifeLock and got in.
Right.
Yes.
Got it.
So it'd be like my really long, like hyper long, complicated password for one password.
Right.
If I were to then use that at some garbage website, I don't know why I would, because that password literally only unlocks my password manager. Is the only thing I use it for.
Don't do that, kids. Don't do that.
Yeah, and it's funny because you would think people using a password manager know the value of not reusing passwords. This is why you have a password manager.
Right. That's why
you have a unique password per site, and then you use it somewhere else. That's a no too, kids.
They have a password manager because someone told them they needed a password manager.
Yeah,
and you know what? To be hilarious is if every account in there was the same password.
I bet.
It's sad. It's sad. It's not hilarious.
I bet none of those people who got breached listened to Security This Week.
I bet not. That's
because there's only 3 people that listen to the show, so the odds are pretty good.
Thank you, Carl's grandma.
That would indicate one of us doesn't listen to it.
No. Hey, listen. I know one of our listeners listens with his kids in the car when he drops them off at school. So I'm just saying we get at least 3 listeners right there in that car.
So we'll bleep our bleeping bleep bleeps.
We get to ruin future generations as well.
Speaking of bleeping computer, I think all of the rest of our stories come from bleeping computer, right?
Yeah, what's funny is occasionally I will see somebody break an article before bleeping computer, but honestly, they are fast at picking these things up and aggregating them. So usually, and they do a pretty decent job of trying to explain it and unwrap what's going on. Like sometimes, for example, we have one on Cisco breach where the bleeping computer article is better than the one Cisco wrote. But
all right, MSI motherboards. I have an MSI motherboard. I have an MSI computer. And, So tell me what the problem is.
So this one's a weird problem. So y'all know when you go to, used to be you could just format back in the day, you could format a CD-ROM with bootable code and just plug it in and boot your computer to install Windows.
Yep.
Or a USB drive
stick.
Nowadays.
You can still do that.
You can make it bootable. And there became a time where that got more difficult because to install it, you needed it to be a secure boot device. And to do that, you needed what was called UEFI, which is the ability to say everything that's on this stick is signed by an operating system vendor. Right. It might have been
a verifiable one.
Microsoft. Yeah, exactly. It was like literally digitally signed code, and I'm only going to boot off a digitally signed code.
Now, can you break that down for our listeners who might not know what digital signatures are? Is that like a password that's just for you that's put into written to those files?
Let me take that.
Yeah, sure.
So the way to think about it is that there's something called the public key infrastructure,
right? Where
I can put up something that is a public key,
yeah,
and then I can sign my code,
yeah.
And I can publish that signature, and you can validate it that it was signed only by me. Because when I do a public key, I also create a private key that I keep secret.
Right.
That private key, only I should ever know.
You being Microsoft.
Or any other vendor.
Or any vendor. Yeah, but not you, Patrick.
I could.
You could, but normally you wouldn't.
It's
In
usually
this
an
case,
organization.
the authority has the private key.
Exactly.
No. The individual has the private key.
Wait. Hold on. The individual is in Microsoft.
Yes.
Microsoft has the private key.
Right. The infrastructure has the public key.
Correct.
And we get turned around and talking about this all the time. It's just,
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So basically, the public key is for public consumption. I take the code and I sign it. I hash it basically. It's a little different than a hash, but I basically do a code signing hash with my private key that only I know, only I, Microsoft, know, only I, NVIDIA, know.
Yeah.
And that produces something that can be verified with the public key, but can't be duplicated with the public key or any other key. So therefore, it came from me. It's signing. It's making sure it came from the source you think it came from.
So let's say it's Microsoft and Patrick. Microsoft has the private key. They give you a signature with the public key. It goes on your USB drive. When you plug that in, the infrastructure or whatever encrypts that thing with their public key, sends it to Microsoft, and Microsoft says, yep, that's legit or not.
Yep.
Right?
Basically.
Yeah, I'm trying to simplify.
Yes, paraphrase.
But yes,
that's good.
So,
a good
so there's no way to change the code. You literally can't open up, an executable or let's say like a license doc and change, a lowercase a to an uppercase a, because now all those files are not signed. And so UEFI booting, secure boot was designed to say, hey, the boot drive needs to be signed by some known vendor,
right?
So that you can install and boot to it. And you say, well, okay, why? Why does that matter? Like if somebody formatted my computer, you'd think you'd know it. And the reason it mattered is it's real easy for me to walk into an office pretending to be a UPS guy or a FedEx guy or a Xerox repairman and plug a USB into a computer, boot to it, pull down all of the password files and that sort of stuff, and then unplug the USB stick, and you'd never see it, right? And then I would have data that I could crack offline.
They did that in the original Iron Man.
I could install rootkits. Oh yeah, exactly. So there you go. So there's all sorts of ways to do that. That's true. Was that
Pepper Potts?
Pepper, yeah, she did that.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of
I have no idea what you guys are talking about, but neither does anybody else who's listening. That's okay.
Anybody
you and me, listener,
we're
in the same boat. You and me,
you know
listener.
What? I think most of our listeners are Marvel Universe fans, and you are the minority on this one.
All right, so 2 of them are Marvel Universe fans.
That's
and
right.
I am the only one.
That's still a majority.
Okay,
still a majority.
I'm with you.
So what happened here, coming back to the article, gentlemen,
I use that term loosely,
is with your MSI motherboards, you're usually, when you update your software, when you patch, like we tell you to do all the time,
right?
You obviously are patching the BIOS of your computer, hopefully. Hint, hint, you should be patching everything. And in this particular case, what happened is with MSI, they used to have a default setting that said only boot to secure boot devices. And then when you updated it, it default switched to, run any code. It doesn't matter.
Wow.
It's a bad configuration.
So really you need to, go in and
do you think that was a deliberate attack?
I don't think so.
To set up for a future attack?
What was that phrase, Patrick? Don't attribute to...
Oh, yeah.
Never attribute to malice what can be explained by incompetence.
Yeah, Hanlon's razor.
There you go. Right. So, honestly, December 16th of 2022, this new this new update came out where it changed this. Honestly, just go in and change it back. We'll have a link to the article as to how to change it. So if you've updated your MSI motherboard since December 16th, just make sure you change it. Actually, interesting timing, though. Like, I always think nefariously, right?
Yes.
If it were me and I wanted to deploy something that would change the default boot of a computer, I would absolutely do it.
Wait a minute. Is this...
It's criminal career advice.
All right.
Yes.
If
you have one shot at changing a BIOS setting to be more or less secure, let's say, when's the best time to do it? right before Christmas when everybody's getting new computers and probably going to be updating all of their drivers and that sort of stuff.
If this is if this was a supply chain attack, it's a nation state level because it hasn't been detected, it hasn't been announced, and it does make it's very convenient for, and I don't mean that no normal sense, it's very convenient for the bad guys, and they're probably going after a specific target in a specific country.
You sounded like the church lady there for a minute. Convenient.
Isn't that convenient?
Convenient. So there you have it.
A beloved character from Saturday Night Live. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Beloved.
Beloved. All right. So what can you do about this? Is there, I mean, if you're not booting anything and you have your computer in your office and it's locked up, should you care about this? I mean,
honestly, should you be worried about this? I worry about everything, but if it's sitting at your house and somebody has to literally get into your house to exploit this, I'm not too worried about it. I'd say, go back in and actually make the secure settings change. There is a way to turn that back on, and you should turn it back on, honestly.
Okay. To bring it to security, like physical security, if you knew that one of your doors on your garage, even when it's locked, can be, forced open by just a little kick, should you worry about it? Yeah. If you're in a rough neighborhood, if you're a high value target, if you, don't have, 150 pounds of dogs to eat intruders, like I do, then, and that's an underestimate.
It is.
I was going to say that's one dog,
but it's
right.
But if you want to be secure, you should pay attention to this stuff.
Yeah.
The problem is you don't know what the hacker is going to use to get you. As Ron White said, I didn't know how many they were going to use to beat me up, but I knew how many they were going to use.
Okay, let's go to Cacti. I don't even know what Cacti is. One of you guys tell me.
Default management monitoring solution for network devices.
Yeah.
I've never used them.
No, I haven't either. They're more of it's a monitoring tool for like IoT devices and that sort of stuff. Yeah. Yep.
Your IT guy will know.
Yeah, and the problem with these types of tools is generally to do what they do to monitor. There's two ways to do it. You can either sit there with no privileges at all, which means you get very little information from the device that you're monitoring, or you can sit there with,
godlike privileges,
administrative level privileges, right?
Yeah.
And get everything from the device, which sounds awesome, right? Because you're like, oh, this is great. Now I know how much disk space is free, or I know when was the last time it responded, or I know whether the printer's out of ink and that sort of stuff. Like all of that stuff requires privilege to do it. Well, the problem is if you have one piece of software that is the holder of all of the privileged keys, then this becomes a much more concerning hack. And in this particular case, that happens. So more than 1,600 instances of the Cacti device monitoring tool was reachable, not only vulnerable, but reachable over the internet with a critical security issue and flaw.
Yeah, it's pretty
so this
critical.
Is actually rating it a 9.8 out of 10. Yeah, this one's pretty high.
That's crazy.
Wow. So there's a couple things I would say here. First off, why would you ever have an IoT / device monitoring tool accessible over the internet and not have it locked down? I just can't imagine a reason why. Like if we at Pulsar Security wanted to monitor all of our devices with something like this, and we just happen to port forward all of the right ports to get access to this, we would lock it down to specific IPs that could access it. There's just no reason to have something open to the internet.
VPNs are your friend.
Website.
VPN, you really don't need remote access if you have VPN.
Right.
Yep, absolutely.
And VPN is a better solution.
Yep. 100%. So, the reason this is so concerning in that sort of light is 1,600 instances accessible on the internet. That's a lot of compromised servers with just simple code. But more importantly, Patrick talks about a VPN. It's still not okay to have something like this, a monitoring device like this, unpatched, because you go, oh, well, you have to VPN in to get access to it before at all. I've had customers say that, where we go, oh, well, this is vulnerable over here. And they go, yeah, but you can't access that unless you're on my network. Yeah. Right, you got to be on my network. And time again, we've seen phishing campaigns be super successful at sending remote access Trojans, where I can send an email to someone, they click on a link, and I get access to the network.
Now you're on their network.
Right, exactly. So you want to be careful here. Patch. But yeah, this one's pretty critical because it is remote code execution.
Yeah. Okay. So, if you don't know if it affects you, pass it on to your IT person, and they probably already know about it, especially if they listen to this show.
You would hope so.
Which they should. Yeah. All right, guys, let's take a little break, and we'll come back and talk about some more Cisco stuff. All right, we're back. It's Security This Week. I'm Carl Franklin. That's my friend Dwayne LaFlante and my other friend Patrick Hines. 2 security guys and another guy. That's what we should call this show.
And another guy.
And that other guy. Okay, well, we were about to... We said we would talk about Cisco. They have a off bypass bug with a public exploit that came up this week.
Yes. So, this one's interesting because this ultimately is 2 different exploits where Cisco warns customers today of a critical authentication bypass vulnerability with public exploit code. So public exploit code is generally can be found in 2 ways. One, a very diligent security researcher goes out and discovers a bug, lets Cisco know, and then obviously they have to create a proof of concept to test it out to make sure that it actually is exploitable. They let Cisco know, they show them the proof of concept. Cisco then fixes it, says thank you very much. And then that researcher releases it.
We should also mention that this is for older routers, right? End of life routers?
Yeah, end of life routers.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, and then there are other public exploits where we see them in the wild, and then researchers seeing them in the wild will put them on GitHub and say, hey, you should be able to test your own systems with this POC code. So you got to be careful when they say publicly available, because sometimes people will assume, oh, well, Cisco must have already patched this, right? In certain cases, like you're absolutely right, Carl, these are end of life VPN routers. There's no guarantee that they're going to patch these, right? And not necessarily that this particular instance, but you got to keep in mind sometimes older hardware, the vendor goes, you know what, it just doesn't make sense for us to patch this. So our recommendation is go buy a new one.
It might as well have a sticker on it that says, replace me.
Right, exactly. And if you call up, they'll say, man, you know what, you should just replace it. Although Cisco's usually pretty good about these types of updates and that sort of stuff. So how do you know you're affected? Well, if you're running a Cisco small business RV016, RV042, RV042G, or RV082 VPN router, you're probably affected. What do you do if you're affected? These routers have reached end of life. So they're actually not receiving patches. And this is a key point. There's lots of times if it's not broke, don't fix it scenario happens where people put things in data centers. I'll tell you, we've done pen tests before where we will go to the customer and say, hey, this is really neat device over here that translates network traffic into RS-232 traffic. What are you guys using that for? And they're like, what is that? And that just for people who are under 45. RS-232 is serial traffic. So that would have been like back in the days before networks existed and before USB cables existed.
That's right. Modems.
This is how you talk to certain devices. Right.
Yeah.
So, you know,
printers.
It's super, it happens a lot, especially in large organizations where you'll have devices that have been sitting around forever that people just don't think about anymore. They're just part of
they become
the
furniture.
Yeah,
furniture.
Exactly. So that would be our recommendations here is, having an assessment of what's in the environment, what's there, what's running, what's not running. We actually did an audit for, I won't say who this is, but we did an audit for a company where we found a server that we could get access to because it hadn't been patched in 6 years. And when we asked the customer, we're like, hey, what about this one server that hasn't been patched in 6 years? They're like, wait, that one's still online? We shut it off 6 years ago.
Whoa.
And what they found is when they said, hey, can we go shut this server off? It's not in use anymore. One of the IT guys went over and shut it off. And then at the next power cycle, it turned itself back on. And it's been on for 6 years.
Oh, that's terrible.
And they just didn't even know it was even on anymore. So, we see these things all the time. Just be careful.
Yeah.
And there's assumptions that kill you. It's assuming that, I assume that that'll work out. It's the James Bond thing. Well, I'm just going to create an overly elaborate death for him and just assume that it goes to plan.
And you say to yourself, okay, well, listen, you guys are talking about old hardware. Sure, I work for, X company and we're really large. And I'm sure we have some old hardware, but, how many of these do you think exist on the internet? According to Shodan, there are about 8,000 of these exploitable VPNs just sitting on the internet right now.
Wow. Ouch.
So no patch. They ain't going to fix it. You need to go and probably find a new VPN router.
Yep. Time to upgrade. All right. So this next one is about Git. And Git is near and dear to any developer's heart who uses source code management. And Git patches 2 critical remote code execution security flaws. Now, this isn't GitHub. This is Git, but GitHub does use Git.
Right.
Correct.
But the Git is the protocol that is used by places like GitHub. And
so this is a neat attack. And so here, if you're affected if you're using Git for Windows less than 2.2.39.02. And if you're using just regular Git version 236, 231, there's like 10 versions. So we will post a link to this article. You should absolutely read it and see if you're affected. And if you are, there is a patch for it. What's really interesting about this is it exploits a Git archive functionality in Git, for untrusted repositories. So if you have a repository and you pull down code, and it's funny, I like it's second nature to me when I pull down code from GitHub to review things like what is the Git functionality? What types of commands are they putting in any of the Git commands? There's other things like Carl. I know you and I have worked on plenty, and Patrick, with plenty of C# sites.
Yep.
Well, if you pull down a C# site from GitHub, typically there's an SLN there, which is the solution file, the project file, if you will, that has all the C# files. Or yes, Patrick.
So you're right, 100% right. But remember when our lawyer told us that in 40 years of practicing law, I was the only client who read contracts before signing them.
Agreed.
So yes, people should do this, but understand that most people, the vast majority, won't read code. They just want to get the job done. I wish that weren't true.
No, but even agree 100%. But let's say you have a massive C# project that's in GitHub and you pull it down and you don't want to read through all the code, which shame on you. But let's say you don't. You just want to run it. The one thing I would tell you to do is this is super important advice, especially for when we're pulling down things, because when we're pulling down things, we're typically pulling down very volatile software. So we always have to look through certain things. But the one thing I would tell you to do is A, look at the SLN file. And B, look at the build steps. So if I pull down a project from GitHub and I just compile it, first off, when I open Visual Studio, there are ways for me to run executables from the SLN file. So in there, if you see weird code trying to run executables, don't open it.
SLN is a solution file.
I can give you more advice. If you have Git for Windows, which if I'm using Windows, so I have that, you open a command line and type git space -- version. And if the version is older, you got to look in that article. But turns out that I had 2.30.1 and 2.39.1 Windows.1 was available. And so I did git space update -git -4 -Windows and said, hey, there's a new version available. Do you want to update? Yep. And it did.
That's good advice.
Yeah. I would absolutely read through. Always keep things like Git updated because you don't even think about those, but they do have the ability to run executables. If you're pulling down code, at least do the minimal looking as to see what is that code going to do when it compiles and when you open it.
And I'm not arguing that that's the right thing to do because it's exactly what I would want done. But I'm just saying that's good that you gave people a shortcut because most people aren't going to review the code or dive in a significant way.
Right.
And it's important that that something be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Cool. By the way, I found that answer on Stack Overflow.
Woohoo, Stack Overflow.
All right, very good. So our last story, and I mean that, new blank image attack hides phishing scripts in SVG files. Patrick, you talked about something like this where data could be put into a JPEG file and then secrets passed along to people, and they don't even, it's nothing that you would see, but it's something that you could use an app to decode and get the message.
This isn't quite steganography, which is what we were talking about.
Yeah.
This is more of it's like the old trick of putting in a single a transparent pixel so that I can track where you are, those kinds of tricks. It's that in that category.
Yeah.
And they're also playing on the fact that HTML is pretty well accepted by email clients.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another reason why this one's actually really interesting and a bit nefarious in that. So the typical campaign for this particular exploit is something like a DocuSign. So you're going to get an email that says, hey, thank you for signing your will or whatever through DocuSign. We really appreciate it, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And you have a link you can click on that will bring you to an actual DocuSign document. So it's real, like legitimate, real DocuSign document. But then there's an attachment that is an HTML file that has this SVG image, which is invisible. And they do what's called code smuggling with the SVG. So when you have an image in HTML, you can set its source. Where do I grab the image from, right? Is it on a web server? Is it local, etc.? Well, with SVG images, you have the ability to specify an XML that has JavaScript in it to do something. And that's what they're doing here is they're actually putting a base64 JavaScript in here that then will redirect your browser to some nefarious website. So it's an interesting exploit in that if you click on the link inside the email, it looks legitimate. And we tell people not to click on links.
Right.
But if you download the file, which is not in a zip, went by all of your email spam filters, no issues.
Right.
You double click on that file, it's going to automatically bring you to a malicious website.
Bummer.
Which is pretty cool. So just be careful if you're not expecting. Cool. Yeah, it is very cool, actually.
Is it awesome, though? That's the question.
It is awesome.
So here's where this gets dangerous, because you might think, you gentle listener may think, well, I'm not going to click on a link for a DocuSign that I'm not expecting, or that that doesn't make sense. Why? I would know which DocuSigns I'm expecting. But if the person you're doing business with, whether it's your realtor or one of your vendors, gets hacked, and their email gets compromised because they click on some other phishing exploit, the hacker will know, oh, you're in the middle of a contract negotiation with them. I'm going to send you a DocuSign with additional terms, or, and a vague message that makes you think it's from, Bill. So they prey on that kind of expectation bias. The expectation bias means that you expect this, so why would you suspect it? So you have to be even more careful in those cases. And that's why I would contact the person and say, hey, did you just send me an updated document? I didn't expect this one. And if they say no, it's like, okay, I think your email's been compromised.
Right.
I got owned by a Facebook hacker. Not badly, but they pulled the wool over my eyes. It was an old friend who I hadn't heard from in years, and I didn't remember if they were on my friends list or not. So, all of a sudden I get a friend request from this person. It's their name and their picture. So I said, sure. And then right away, hey, how's it going, old friend? And I said, can't complain, but I do anyway. How are you? And then this should have given it away. This guy is in his 70s. He's long since retired. And punctuation was horrible, and he's a great speller, and he's a stickler for the English language, right? And he says, all fine, comma, lowercase, I have been working and hanging out with family, feel truly blessed, blah, blah, blah. Bad punctuation, bad grammar and stuff. And then he said, hey, by the way, have you heard about blah, blah, blah yet? It's yet. If you haven't, you will. Have you heard about yada, yada yet? So I played along. I said, no, what's that? And then he comes back with all this BS. And so, which is about how to get free money from the government or something.
Sure.
And so I said, say, do you remember where you and I went with a whole bunch of friends about 10 years ago on a trip? Do you remember where that was? Silence.
Oof.
And then I basically emailed my old friend because I had his email address. I said, hey, you're not chatting with me on Facebook right now, are you? Nope, I was hacked.
Nope. No.
So I reported the guy or the girl.
I
whatever.
honestly, I don't think that you were taken in by that because you figured it out. You didn't
I know.
send him any
Well
money.
done.
Well, of course I did, but I was,
Dude,
I should
most
have
people
known.
don't figure it out until they've sent something or done something
Right,
that they
right.
regret.
I should have known not to encourage him
Yeah.
or her or whatever.
Although I think it was a great idea you encourage him. Honestly, we do that all the time.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
stall
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
Yeah.
Install them.
We
yeah,
will
yeah.
spend as much time because you know what? The more time we spend on the line with them trying to track them down, the less time they're spending with somebody's
They
around.
get
that's
so
true.
mad. They get so
my
mad
God,
when they
that's
when they realize you've been wasting their time.
Hey, do you
Right.
remember
Especially
those
when they
40
call-
years when there was a telephone attached to the wall? You remember those 40 years? It wasn't very long, but anyway, we used to have these things attached to the wall, and they'd ring during dinner, and somebody would say, "Hey, can I talk to blah blah blah?" And I'd say, "Sure, hang on." And I'd just put the phone down and walk away.
My,
Right.
if we're doing blast from the past, not security related, but my brother had an old style rotary phone
Right.
in his barn. You kids ask your parents what the rotary phone is, and his daughter came out and said, the phone inside the house is broken. This was in his shed, and can I use this thing? And he said sure. And she started putting her finger in the holes for the
To punch the buttons.
dialer, and she didn't understand what the hell
This
was
one's
going on and
broken,
how to
too.
use it. Yeah,
That's great. Yeah. You can't blame
that's
them, though.
awesome.
They'd never seen it before.
no, never
Nope.
seen it before.
It's just kind of funny.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's a show.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Next week, we're going to
Yes.
do the same bat time, same bat channel,
100%.
right? Okay, good.
We'll be here.
All right.
Nice talking to you guys.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.